Hi, my name is Michael Thomas, and in this show, I speak to a broad range of Christians connecting what God is saying to their work. Today, I'm speaking to Tim Croll. Tim is a coach working with 20 different service-based companies in a group setting. He has a master's in leadership and is a certified KidLead coach. So, Tim, great to have you on the show today. So, tell me a bit about yourself and what you do.
I hate titles. No, it's amazing because like so many times as we look at life and as we look at the things that we've done, everybody likes to hear the sizzle reel. They like to hear about what you've accomplished and everything else. And oftentimes we don't get a chance to talk about the sizzle or the unsizzle part of things, right? The part that is all of the battles and all the challenges. And so I always find it interesting when anybody ever tells me to tell them a little bit about myself. It's like, well, this is a long story. How much time you got, man? I'm over 40. I got a lot of things going on, right? But if I just look at it from a sizzle reel kind of a thing, I mean, like the passion that I've had is to really attempt to leave an impact on another person. And the goal, if I were to boil it down as far as a mission statement and to look at exactly what it is that I do, my whole life purpose is to help an individual grow from point A to point B. And sometimes that takes on the situation of what you guys are looking at right now as far as in a coaching situation where I'm working with businesses. Sometimes it's a coaching situation, the KidLead. I love working with them because that's middle-aged kids. And then honestly, sometimes it comes in a personal life development type coaching situation. But understand at the core of it, what drives me and what my passion is to be able to help people get from one point to another point. And so often in life, you know, whether it's in a personal life or in a business life, we don't realize all of the different things that have kind of got us stuck in this one point. We see what is at point B, but we just don't know quite how to get there. And so my job, or the little bit about myself, is to help you get unstuck and then get from that point A to point B. So hopefully that kind of sums it up. But man, there's a lot of things that we could peel back the onion layers on and we could talk about because there's so many experiences and so many things that I've learned over the last 40 plus years.
So how would you say that you touch people's lives? You mentioned going from A to B, but when they come away from a discussion with you, how would they say that you've touched them, you know, maybe on an emotional level, on a personal level, mental level? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I actually love this question because it's something that's so much deeper. So here's exactly the process as far as what happens in a typical conversation. Excuse me. Somebody will come to me and reach out and say, I have problem X. And a lot of times, especially in business, and I mean, like, that's the world that I live in, is in the business world. I work with e-com businesses. I work with service-based businesses. But in reality, what I do is, and where I specialize, is business development and strategy. And then part of that development of the business is how do you present yourself as the leader in that business? And what are the strategies and the tools that you need to be able to build yourself to, you know, to become the better leader inside of that business? So, you know, an individual business leader, business owner will come and say, I have problem X. What they don't realize is that while they have problem X, there's a lot of things that created that problem. There's a lot of things that could be either exterior, like in our economy. I mean, shoot, right now we're going through chaos in our economy, and I mean, everybody's quarantined at this exact moment. But there's problem. You know, there's something that's creating that problem. It could be exterior. It could be something that's going on inside of the business that they didn't have a plan or structure for. But what most people don't realize is that many, many times that problem comes from inside themselves. And so when you're talking about how do we touch people's lives and how do we change things, while they come with the face problem, a lot of times there's more of a root problem. And that root problem is what we really truly dig in and try to discover. So my philosophy as I step into coaching, and whether this is business, whether it's personal or whatever, I always go back and look at Luke chapter 2, and it talks about how Christ grew. He grew in 4 specific areas. He grew mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually. Every time I've ever stepped into a business and looked at what they're doing and how they're growing, I should say almost every time, I can always point it back to something that might be lacking in that business leader's life. And so this is where the application comes. And this is what I love about Scripture and about being a Christian and about looking at that is the truth and the information is timeless. It bridges so many different gaps, and so often we forget that there is a solid base of truth off of which we as business owners can operate. I mean, the law of you will reap what you sow is a parable that Christ spoke. Now, many times, as far as in the church and the Christianese and everything else, we talk about the fact that it's something that has to do with what you're doing and living your own life. But the principle stays the same, even if it's in business. You're going to reap what you sow. I mean, if you're a shyster and you're a sly guy, you're going to reap what you sow. But if you're giving back and doing things in business, you're going to reap what you sow. I mean, that's just one principle. And we could go down tons and tons of different principles that are found throughout Proverbs and Psalms. I mean, there's so many different business principles that apply. But at the core of everything, and this is what I really love, is the fact that I get to go back every day and work with people and help them grow physically, spiritually, mentally, and socially. And all four of those areas allow for a solid base for the individual to grow from point A to point B. But then as they're growing, it gives them the ability to have a larger business and support a larger growing business, because you're not an island, right? So especially, and stop me if I'm going too long on this stuff. So, because I get on my soapbox and all of a sudden I'm just like, but so many times what we find is, especially whether it's in the corporate world or in business, you have influence and you have impact, but you're not just impacting those employees, you're developing leadership teams. And then as you teach those people and as you lead those people, they then disperse and then they go back to their families. So by you touching 5 employees, you in essence are maybe touching up to 20, 25 people because of your leadership touching 5 employees, which then goes and talks to all of their family. Not to mention their community groups, not to mention who they hang out with and their friends. So one person's impact can ripple down or ripple out and have an impact on a community. And that's why I think it's so important to get back to these basics of, are you growing physically? Are you taking care of your body? Do you have the energy? Are you taking care of yourself mentally? In other words, your education. Are you learning more? Are you studying and doing things that are going to increase the skills and the talents and the knowledge that you have and applied wisdom? Are you increasing your social impact? How are you doing in networking with people? And then spiritually, how are you taking care of your soul? Because that is a key element that everybody skips. And we need that recovery time. I mean, there's so many scriptures about how God went away and Jesus actually went away and he fasted for 40 days and he often went and prayed by himself. There's so many times that we look at that where he was taking care of his soul and taking care of his spiritual part, and we often miss that. So to answer the question directly, how do I touch people's lives, is I really truly want to help them see the blind spots that are missing, and once they have seen those blind spots, give them a path or a plan to be able to overcome those blind spots.
Could you maybe give me an example of where you've seen something on the surface and how the root cause was something that was there they couldn't see as a blind spot, and then how that actually, by changing the root, you actually changed the results on them and then all the people that were working for them?
There's 1,000 of them. How many do you want? It happens every day. It's amazing to me. So I want to make sure I give a good example, but at the same time, I also want to protect the integrity of my relationship. So I'm not giving away something that's like, oh, I know who that is. I want to be careful about that. So that's why I'm going to pause and just make sure that I give the right answer to this. One of the biggest things that I've seen come through has been a business owner approaching me and saying, I cannot find any good employees. And so what they do is they're looking at that and saying well, there's nobody but a bunch of millennials that are out there and they don't want to work. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. It's them, it's them, it's them. It's theirs a big, and so they're actually looking and focusing on, it's everybody else's fault. It's not my fault. In the reality of it, you're not somebody anybody really truly wants to work for. And so come with problem X. We talked about that. Coming with the problem of, I cannot find any good employees. Well, are you a good employer? And switching it. And then that's when, and again, a lot of us as business owners, entrepreneurs, we got really, really big egos. So sometimes it's not very, it's not something that we want to hear, right? We don't want to hear that it's our problem. It's not everybody else's problem. But I can honestly say, I've seen this probably in 3, 4, 5 different situations where once we change the mindset and say, okay, it's my responsibility as a leader to create a culture in my company that people want to be there. It's my job as a leader to train and set accountability and responsibility in the millennials. So think about it this way, and this is probably the biggest challenge that I've seen in every situation. Without dismissing personal responsibility, I want to be really careful about this because everybody has a personal responsibility. A millennial person that I've seen, they either are a rock star or they're not. There's no in between in this. The biggest challenge I think that's truly facing our society today is the fact that millennials have grown up without parents. They have not been taught responsibility. They have not been taught accountability. They have not been taught hard work. They don't have a great ethic as far as when it comes to morals. They don't have all of these things. They have never been taught because our generation that has raised them, whether it's the baby boomers, Gen X, whichever, we haven't taken the time to invest in their lives when they were younger. Now they're entering into the workforce. And as business owners, we're looking at them. They're a bunch of knuckleheads. They're a bunch of people that don't show up. They don't do what they say. And suddenly we're trying to incorporate that. As a forward-thinking, proactive business owner, this is an opportunity to show up in a more powerful way than you could ever even imagine. But you have to approach it from the angle and looking at it. So is this a place that we can help support and teach? And again, I'm not saying put your business at risk. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that as we look at the whole situation, there are so many underlying factors, so many root causes of things that are going on when you can't find employees. It might be the culture. It might be the way that you're looking at millennials. It might be the skill sets that you have as far as how to train and how to teach, how to hold people accountable. There are so many other things that are going on besides just the fact that I can't find any workers because they're all a bunch of knuckleheads. It's very rarely that everybody's a knucklehead. It's usually something else that's going on, and that's typically the deeper issue that's happening in their life. So, do you want more examples, or is that good?
That's a good example. So, in this quest of yours to move people from point A to point B, what single thing has moved your career forward the most?
Well, I mean, obviously it goes back to God, but the one thing that I can say is the way that God showed up in people's lives for me. And we're called to be the hands and the feet, right? So people had to do that for me. And I can go back and I can point to multiple different mentors, people that have taught me different things or shown me blind spots that were in my own life at different points in my life when I was able and willing to listen to them. Because quite frankly, not everybody is willing to listen. Not everybody is willing to be teachable at different points because we've got our ego in place, we've got our pride in place, and sometimes God's got to really break that. But when you're ready to be broken and when you're ready to listen, God will have people show up in your life that will show you the path and the next step that needs to go there. And frankly, there's been dozens of individuals that have stepped in at different times saying, okay, Tim, how are you doing this? And how are you doing that? And what's going on? Currently, I have 3 different mentors that I work with. One I work with on a monthly basis. One's kind of when I need help. We kind of talk about different things. And actually 2 I work with on a monthly basis now that I'm thinking about it. But for me, the one single thing that I can go back to is a mentor or a coach that has showed up in my life being the hands and feet of God and showing up in that way. So the number one thing is those people being willing to be used as a instrument from God and listening to what God's telling them to do.
So how do you identify that someone is going to be a mentor versus someone that's got maybe a negative effect if they speak into your life? How do you choose?
This is a really deep question. The very, very first thing is what I want to look at, because I've had trouble dealing with different people and looking and listening to what they have to teach and say. The very first thing that I'm looking for is what they are doing or what they have done. Has it been repeated more than one time? Because I shouldn't say anybody. Sometimes people will become a coach or become a mentor or do something in business and try to start speaking into somebody's life, but they've only ever done it one time. So what I'm looking for is how many times have you done this to be able to help somebody grow, somebody to be able to move? How often have you done that throughout your life? And I want to look at the results of what's going on. So that's number one. Number two, are they showing up in a transparent way? In other words, are they willing to be real with you and share their mistakes as well as some of the successes that they have? And that's the part, again, going back to the original question that you asked me about the sizzle versus the unsizzle reel, like showing up in a way that is very transparent. That's what I'm looking for. And then the last thing is do I resonate with them? In other words, are we aligned in a way for our service? Are we aligned in our moral values? Are we aligned in ways that are going to be, I don't want to say more profitable, but that's the word that comes to mind. Are we aligned in ways that are going to push us in the same direction? So I think those three areas are basically what I'm looking for. I've got, like I said, 3 people, and they've stuck with me. And when I say stuck with, I've gone through a lot of crap. So yeah, I guess they did stick with me. But then it's taken me years and years to realize the power of the network. And it's taken me a long time to be able to find, and I've got 3 really, what I feel like are really true co-warriors. And I meet with them on a weekly basis. We call often and we talk about things that are real, share our challenges and things like that. So those are kind of the 2 aspects, but it's taken me a long time to realize and figure out exactly who it is that I really truly align with.
That's great. And if I had to ask, so you were saying these coaches help you identify blind spots, things you don't see. Have you seen any trends towards like a different personality profile working in tandem with your profile? Is there an overlap between the types of people that you need to work with because they seeing things that you're not seeing, and vice versa? How do you see that dynamic happening with it? Where the differences are good differences?
Right. I almost feel like this requires a double answer. Because when you're looking at the personality, it's a long conversation. There's obviously 4 personalities and the way the personalities interact with each other and the way they communicate. Yes, it's necessary to understand personalities. It's necessary to learn about how and what each of those personalities, where their strengths lie versus where their weaknesses are, things like that. And yes, I have people in my life when it comes to a business standpoint that will support the things that I'm weak at. I don't know which, everybody follows a different one, but let's just assume the DISC is probably most popular, the DISC profiling. I'm very high I. That is my number 1 top profile. And then I got a little bit of D and a little bit of S, and depending on the situation, they pop up every once in a while depending on what's going on. I have 0 compliance. I'm 0 on my C. So my compliant part is all about understanding the rules, looking at the details, all of that. So I have people in my life, and I mean, you caught some errors on my LinkedIn profile because I didn't have my wife look at it. She's my C. She's the one that looks at all the little details. But that's not me. I mean, I know that that's one of the areas that I'm weak at, and I usually try to have somebody go and follow back around and say, let's look at grammar, let's look at the spelling, let's look at that kind of stuff. And so from a relational standpoint and getting things done, I definitely have to have those people. I have to make sure that I'm looking at the personalities and making sure that there's things that are going on. Now, from the mentor, the coaching side of things, I don't see that as an important piece, and I don't take that into an account when I'm actually looking for a mentor or looking for somebody that's going to be teaching me. What I do take into account is, do they understand how to communicate with the different personalities, and do they understand my personality? So whether that mentor is a S, a C, a D, an I, that's not really as important as does that D know how to talk to an I and know how to communicate with an I? And if that is the case, then they can relate with me and I can resonate and we can talk back and forth. Because each personality wants to be talked to in a different way. Because as you know, like with the D, it's like, let's just get to the bottom line. What's the bullet point of what's going on? An S, on the other hand, it's like, how you doing? What's going on in your life? They want to build that relationship. The I is like, okay, what's going on with the party? Like, oh, let's go, right? And so each one of those personalities has a little bit different. And that's where I truly believe a good mentor is going to be able to resonate and talk with each one of the personalities. And that is more important than to know, well, I have to be mentored by an I personality, or I have to be mentored by a D. I don't believe that at all. I believe that a good mentor will adapt to what it is that the mentee needs to hear at the right and appropriate time. And just to say this, and I'll give you another example of this, because inside of the 20 plus businesses that I coach, I've got a wide range of different personalities. I've got some that are SC, I've got some that are DI, I've got some that are IS, ID. I mean, like, I've got a ton of different personalities, but I do not talk to everyone exactly the same. It would be foolish for me to come to each meeting and assume that everybody's going to hear exactly the same thing. So for my SC, we dig into the details. We look at the facts. We look at what's going on. And then it's a long, slow relationship, and there's a lot of change that are going on. We look at priorities. We look at what's the plan that we're going to put in place. With the D, it's like, and I apologize, somebody's going to be looking at this and saying, it's almost like I go, shut up and do what I'm telling you to do. I mean, like, that's how direct and abrupt that I have to be with a D, because it's like, dude, stop. This is it. Do this. And they're all like, okay, yeah, great. But they respond really well, because that's what they want to know. They want to know the bottom line. And when you understand the personalities as a mentor, you want to be able to go into the situation and talk with them in the way that they need to be, and the way that they need to hear it. So that's why I feel like there's two answers to that question that you're asking. On the one hand, absolutely, when I'm building my team, I want all four personalities represented, because that will make my team stronger. When I'm mentoring, I'm not necessarily, I don't have to be mentored by an I just because we're both I's. I need to know that the guy knows how to talk to me and resonate with me. And the same thing when I mentor somebody else, I want to make sure I understand their personality so that I'm talking with them in the correct manner. So I don't know if that's the exact answer to the question that you're asking, but it's definitely, there's a lot of thought process that goes into it, a lot of psychology. And again, I'm not proclaiming to be a psychologist or professional. I've just seen so much that this is what I've learned over the last several years, both in coaching and working with people and mentoring. You need to know what their personalities are and how to communicate with each one of those.
That's really good. That's really great. So you've discussed now what's moved your career forward the most. What has been the single thing that has moved your relationship with God forward the most?
Challenges. That's the only time that I feel like I ever grow. When things are going good, it feels like, hey, I'm on top of the world and I don't need anything and I'm okay, I'm good. I don't have to do devotions. I don't have to talk. I don't have to ask. I don't have put me in a challenging situation. It's like, how the heck did I get here? I need help. So challenges are the number one thing as far as the growth, because we always grow outside of our comfort zone. We never grow in our comfort zone. And God's got a funny way of putting us in positions, situations where we are outside of what we are comfortable with. And when we are outside, that means we have to learn a new set of skills. We have to learn a new set of way of doing life. Quite frankly, right now, we are outside of our comfort zone. 90%, 99% of the people right now do not feel comfortable in the situation that they're in this exact moment. And it's challenging us, and we're seeing all sorts of different reactions. People that are getting angry, people that are upset, people that are scared, people that have a lot of fear. But in this exact moment, because of all of the virus stuff that's going on, in this exact moment is when leadership truly rises. And this gives the opportunity for leadership to show up in bigger ways than ever before. So challenges are definitely the very first thing that I would point back to as far as how and what has helped my growth the most. The second thing, obviously, is the fact that people have spoken into my life and they've shown me some of the spots. And then one of the last things, and this has really, truly helped, this is my journal. Being able to document the path, walking through the challenges, has completely revolutionized my life. And when I was younger, I never really thought that I would say that, but I've got 3 or 4 journals now that are completely full. And in that, I actually journal in 3 specific ways, and I've added a 4th one most recently. I journal, what are the confirmations that God's given me that I'm on the right path? How is he providing? That's the second one. And then the third one is, what are the lessons that I'm learning? So like when I'm starting to do a study, and whether it's doing a study on the fear nots, for example, that's the most recent study. I've learned that every time that God tells us to be strong, be courageous, or fear not, it is always followed by an action. So don't be like talking to the shepherds, fear not, and go find the baby. Talking to Joseph, fear not, take Mary as your wife. Mary, fear not, this is going to be okay. Everything's going to be, go find your aunt. So all of these things that you're looking at, there are definite, and so far, and I haven't done a complete study, but so far, every time we hear that, be strong, be courageous, and do the work. Be faithful, trust God. Like every time there's an action that comes after it. My favorite one right now is in First Chronicles, I think. Yeah, First Chronicles chapter 28, when David is passing the mantle of leadership to Solomon, and he says this, I believe it's in verse 20, be strong and courageous and do the work. And then he goes on, he says, because my God, and you think about it, David's old at this time, all of the stuff that David had to go through, killing Goliath, the sheep, all the stuff that he went through, and he says, my God is going to be with you. I mean, like, that's enough to give you goosebumps when you realize how much stuff David went through, and he's passing the mantle of leadership now to Solomon, giving them plans for the temple, saying, go do the work, be strong, be courageous, and do the work. I don't know how I got on that rabbit trail, but anyway. I forgot what we were originally talking about.
What moved your career with God for the most? Yeah. I just feel like maybe our conversation is not complete until you talk a little bit about your KidLead coaching and how that integrates in with everything else that you're doing.
Well, again, it comes back to how do you move somebody from point A to point B? And so whether it is, and primarily people like talking about business owners, entrepreneurs, but this applies to every person, literally in every walk of life, and it is not age specific. And so in the KidLead coaching program, what it is, it's a 16-point training, a leadership training that really works for middle schoolers. And they come in and they do different types of training than we're used to. And as you know, like, especially when you're doing corporate training or you're doing any kind of teaching, a lot of times we sit in a classroom as adults or as, 20-year-olds, we're sitting in a college, and it's all just listening to somebody taking notes. The cool thing that I love about KidLead, and this is what I've adapted a lot of my teaching and training on, is the fact that the KidLead main person gives instructions to the kid coach. And so the way the pods are set up is you typically have 5 or 6 people in the pod. You have, when I say 5 or 6 kids, I should say 5 or 6 kids, and then they have one adult coach. The one adult coach works directly with whichever leader is chosen for that activity. And then that kid, the adult coach never says anything to the group. It only talks and whispers in the ear of that kid leader. So the KidLead part teaches each one of these kids leadership skills on ethics and morality and communication and problem team building, like all of these different skills and things that are going on. It's really, really powerful because they're actually doing an activity. And as they do that activity, they learn how to be a better leader. They learn how to be a better person. So that's what, in a brief synopsis, that's what KidLead is all about. But the principles always are the same. What we want to do is be able to teach skills, talents to kids, teenagers, and so on, and get them to move from point A to point B. That is always the foundational principle.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. And my final question is, how can people help you touch the lives of others?
To be honest with you, that's a hard one for me to answer because in everything that I do, like, I'm always looking to see how can I touch somebody else's life and how can I influence and how can I do that. And so to be able to say, well, how can somebody help me do that? It's really hard to kind of come up with a very specific answer other than for me to be able to say, show up the way that you are and embrace what God's called you to do. Because by all of us embracing what God's called us to do, that's going to make the world a better place. The number one challenge that we have is all of the lies that we've been told for, almost our entire life. The beliefs that we've formed as children transfer into our lives as adults. And as I coach and as I talk to people, oftentimes those beliefs are so strong that we have to break them. Well, first of all, we have to identify them. But once you identify them, then you have to break the belief of what you've been taught as a child. And then as you break that belief, it gives you the freedom to serve. It gives you the freedom to enter into what God's truly called you to do. And for me, for example, and I'll just use this because this is a belief that I had and was taught as a child. Growing up, the only way that I could be in ministry was if I was a pastor, a youth pastor, head pastor, if I'm working in teaching kids in the Sunday school. For me, that was the belief that was formed. Now, nobody ever really truly came across and said, this is what you have to believe, right? It was just modeled. And then, so therefore, as a child, I accepted that belief and I accepted that as a reality. So I had to identify that in my own life and figure out, is this belief that I hold a true or a false belief? And once I identified that it's a false belief, then that gave me the freedom to be able to break it and to enter into an area in a life of ministry completely outside of what I believed was possible. So to answer that question, how can other people help touch lives and work with me and whatever? The biggest thing is understand God created you as an individual and he's calling you for a specific purpose. And inside of that specific purpose, there is nothing wrong with saying, I am in ministry as an artist, as a music writer. I am in ministry as a business coach. I'm in ministry as a janitor. I'm in ministry. All of those things have a place in God's kingdom to reach out and to look and help and leave an impact on other individuals. And when you can embrace that and understand that, you can change the world. So working with me in that is really, truly an understanding of you are a really, truly uniquely created individual that God has called in ways that nobody else has ever been called in. And so don't ever, ever underestimate the impact that you can have no matter where you're at in your life.
That's really good. And Tim, we really value you and we thank you for your time and speaking to us. And yeah, God bless in your work.
Thanks, man. Absolutely. And I don't know if people want to get in touch. I'm on Facebook. That's totally fine. I've got a website and stuff like that. So
how can people get in touch with you? Can you share that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I'm on Facebook, so you can totally connect with me on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. That's another way because it's not limited to the 5,000. But I also have a website, and it's my name, timcroll.com. And I try to put as much on there as I can, but at the same time, there's way too much stuff. So sometimes it's better just to connect either on Facebook. Let's start a conversation and see how we can work together.
Right. So I'll put those links below in the description. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to you, yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. Yep. And anything that I can do to help, that really, again, it comes down to the fact of I want to make sure that I'm helping people grow in the ways that they can. Sometimes I don't have enough time to talk individually with everybody, but if it's possible, I'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think your analogy is right in that, Tim, you were talking about those 4 areas that Jesus grew in. I think that's kind of the scope of your type of work. So yeah, to the extent, I guess, people looking at those areas, I guess there's potentially a match between the people that come to you and what you can do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be expecting people, if they need a psychiatrist, I think you'd be the wrong guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing is like, that's the foundational thing, but nobody ever comes to me and says, hey, I want to grow physically. Like, dude, I'm not a trainer. I'm definitely not. But from a balance perspective, I mean, that's just one little piece of the puzzle. So again, a lot of people come because they want to look at, business development or whatever, looking at, hey, I'm in a crisis and I got to figure out how to get out of it. So that's a lot of what's going on. But it's just, there's so many foundational principles that come from scripture. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is right. So you take where the person's at, you say there's a problem here, but is the problem physical? Then that's very different to how a physical trainer would approach it, which is saying, I can make you feel 10 times better. And that's obviously not your mission. And
right, exactly. Right, exactly.
Yeah, so that's great. I just love how everything works together. Slowly, I'm connecting the dots too with all the discussions I'm having about where everyone fits in. And if obviously, my job is to try to connect people up with the right people in this amazing body.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thanks.
Well, let me know how I can help. I'd love to be able to be a service. And, that to me is really, really exciting. So
wonderful. Thank you, Tim. God bless.